And now I'm talking to Dann Kenningham, who is the National Coordinator of ATD Ireland. Dann, welcome to Near FM.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, we're in the Epic Museum in Dublin City Centre around the Docklands. I believe yesterday was a very important day in the ATD calendar and other people's calendars as well, wasn't it? Can you tell us a bit about what happened yesterday?
Yeah, by all means, yeah. So yesterday was the 17th of October, the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. And it's celebrated, or commemorated, you should really say, across the world. It's a UN recognised day. But here in Ireland, we have an October 17th committee, which is about 15, 20 different organisations who support families who are struggling. And we come together every year on that day down by the famine statues. There's a stone called the Poverty Human Rights Stone. And that day is all about listening to the voice of people who are struggling. So we'll get officials down there, the mayor came down, different members of society or government. And the day is about listening to the lived experience of people who are struggling.
And am I right in saying the ATD are the kind of main kind of coordinators of it?
Well, we do it in partnership with all these other groups, but we lead it in some ways, but we try to do it as a collective, yeah.
And I only realised yesterday, I wasn't able to go yesterday to the event on the 17th. I was hoping to go, but I couldn't go for a couple of reasons. But yesterday was kind of special as well because it was an anniversary, wasn't it?
It was the 35th anniversary of the day, and it was the 30th year that the United Nations have recognised it as well. So it's quite a big anniversary.
Go ahead, yeah.
I was just going to say, and we had one of our young lads who's from this area, from Dublin, who actually went to New York the day before yesterday to speak at the United Nations on behalf of Ireland.
Was that Paul? Was it?
No, it was Andrew Kelly,
Okay.
and he went there with another guy called Mark Hogan, and they spoke at the United Nations yesterday because it was the day for the eradication of poverty, and they spoke out about discrimination, poverty in Ireland, and they spoke about hope.
I've done loads of interviews with Pierre Klein over the years. I've done a couple with Paul Brazil as well. Pierre has gone. He's in France, is he?
Yeah, he's still part of ATD, but he's now over in France. Yeah.
And you're originally English, but you're living in Ireland a long time, eh?
Well, I'm originally English from Yorkshire. My mum's from County Mayo, but I've been in Ireland now 2.5 years. But I've been in ATD for 26 years now in different countries.
And what was your experience like in the other countries?
Well, we started off in London. We were there for quite a while, and then we ended up doing 12 years in ATD UK, based in London, in Peckham. And then we spent a few years out in the Philippines, in Manila, where you can imagine, the poverty there is quite in your face. There's families living under bridges, living in cemeteries. But again, we're always surprised by people's courage, and you'd see families coming out of the cemetery, but the kids would be dressed ready for school, and they'd make the most of things, and they had a lot of courage and a lot of solidarity. And then we lived a while in Belgium and Holland, so we've been around a little bit of time in South America as well.
And do you like it in Ireland?
No, I love Ireland. Yeah, I've been wanting to come back to Ireland for a long time. Yeah. But it's funny, you see, wherever you go in the world, you see the same suffering, but you also see the same courage. So you can see a family who's struggling in Manila and a family who's struggling in Ireland, and there's commonalities. You know what I mean?
This day, yesterday, the 17th of October, which is a Monday, the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, it was originally set up or organised by a man who founded your organisation, wasn't it? I can't think of his first name, Lorensky or something?
Yeah, you did right, yeah. So ATD was set up in France, ATD Fourth World, it's called fully, was set up in France in the 40s, and it was set up by a guy called Joseph Brzezinski, who worked in an emergency housing camp where families were living in a terrible situation, in the 40s, and there was a lot of kind of pure charitable stuff happening at the time, and his philosophy was like to stop the giving of charity, but to open like a preschool for the kids, to open an adult learning centre where they could learn, to open a garden where they could work together. So ATD has always been founded on not kind of charitable giving, but creating opportunities where people can be the best of themselves. You know what I mean?
Like, how are you and the people you work with finding the cost of living crisis in Ireland over the last year in particular?
I think it's the same for many families, but what we're realising, families, especially if you look at the wider picture, lockdown, families were struggling. We work with up in Ballymun, in Darndale, in central Dublin. There was already isolated, there was already struggling. Then lockdown hit people, so that knocked people back even further, especially with mental health issues and isolation. And then now the cost of living, it's a perfect storm for people. We had one parent who came in and says he's rationing his toothpaste for his kids because things are so expensive now. And that's in Ireland, and it's the same over in London.
Am I right in saying that the level of poverty in Britain is, and the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland, is actually in some ways worse than Ireland proportionally?
I don't have the stats, but I know when we were working in London, it was very hard for families living in London, as it is in Dublin. I don't know if it's worse or not, but there's a lot of work to be done for sure. Yeah, it's not any better. It's the same across Europe. It's a big issue everywhere. Yeah.
And you and ATD are big supporters of the UN Global Goals or SDGs, aren't you?
Yeah. One of the projects on display today is something that we call Leave No One Behind, and that's the Sustainable Development Goals promise. It's supposed to be, these goals can't be reached until everyone's involved. So in Ireland we have a whole project called Leave No One Behind, and it was actually the Ambassador David Donoghue, who's Irish, who were part of that promise originally at the United Nations. So we go out across Ireland and we try to meet groups who don't normally take part in stuff, and we run workshops about, we mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, but we also try to focus on what action's needed, and what action are people doing already. So for example, we visited different groups. One of the groups in Dublin, they're starting a sustainable garden, and it's for people who's been in prison, but also people who are struggling with addiction. And we're trying to highlight the importance of these projects that really do help people who are often left behind. So we promote what other groups are doing as well as ourselves.
So you kind of travel around Ireland and do presentations, do you?
Presentations, but hands-on work with people. Like we'd go and volunteer with this garden, we'd go help plant trees, or we'd go and do a creative workshop. But it's to recognise what other people are doing. And it's funded by Concern. So Concern are also concerned about leaving people behind.
When you're saying there you're funded by Concern, is that just for that garden, or in general you're funded by Concern?
That one project's funded by Concern, but other projects are funded by...
I heard of it actually, yeah. I did.
I'll show you the leaflet over there, it's very nice. And other projects are funded by the Human Rights Commission, private donations. Yesterday was funded by the Department for Social Protection. So we get funding from different sources,
Could you tell me a bit about, our listeners on AirFM rather, a bit about the Poverty Stone here in Dublin?
Sure. It's a shame we don't have a photograph, but
I have a photograph.
So we're just over the road from the Poverty Stone, and what I find important was the famine statues have been there for a long time. I don't know how long, 15 years or so, and we, about 10 years ago, with the support of many organisations, had a stone placed just near the famine statues, and you can obviously see the link between the two. So you're talking about the famine, but we're also talking about modern day poverty, and that stone is it's written in French, English and Irish, and it says that coming together is our solemn duty, and when people are living in poverty their rights are violated. So that's written on the stone there, and every year, like I say, for the 17th of October, the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, we come around that stone, 100, 200 people, and we're there yesterday, and it's a time to really take a moment to think about people who are in poverty, but also to listen to what they have to say, listen to them as experts, listen to their experience, listen to their hope, their solutions, and the people who are often the ones speaking are the ones listening. So your TDs, your officials are the ones listening on that day.
I know the Lord Mayor generally comes to the 17th of October event every year. Were there any other, I'm just curious because I'm interested in politics, were there any other kind of politicians at it yesterday?
There wasn't many official politicians there. There was a lot of people, so it was hard to say who was there or not. But over the years, we normally get a few TDs or ministers. We've had ambassadors there, So in the crowd, there could have been all sorts of people, but there wasn't any official ministers there that day.
just to go back to what you're saying about just talking about the work of ATD, as well as travelling around doing presentations and working with groups around the country, I think you have like a few official ATD groups in Dublin, do you?
Yeah, so I mean, the travelling around isn't our main project at all. Our main work is to be with families, supporting families. So we go up to Ballymun, we'll go up to Darndale, Ballyfermot, inner city Dublin, and we visit families and we support them with whatever we can do, if it's advocacy or going to court or speaking to the teachers with them. So we support families hands-on as well, and we do every week, we have an open house up in Mountain Joy Square, just around the corner, where it's, especially since COVID, it's an open door where people can come in for a cup of tea, come in for an art workshop, come in for a chat. So we do that every Tuesday, and it's called Tuesday with a C. So we do different activities, and with that we do also cultural and nature outings with people, because we've realised since COVID, just for people to get a chance to get out of Ballymun for the day, to go down to Wicklow or Bray or somewhere like that, it's important, or to go to a museum. So we do that, and then we do a lot of what we say kind of policy work. So we try to work with advocacy. We try to work with the government. So at the moment we've got a big campaign which yourself have been part of, where we're trying to, and this is again with other organisations, we're not alone, it's called the Add the 10th Alliance. So we're trying to get the government to introduce a 10th ground in the equality legislation. So now there's already 9. I can't now name all 9, but you can't be discriminated against because of your gender, because of your sexuality, because of your race, disability, because of your race, because of your marriage status. So there's 9 traveller status. There's 9 already, but you can still be discriminated against because of the way you talk, your postcode, your accent, the way you dress. And a lot of our lads that say, for example, coming from Sheriff Street or coming from Darndale, they're afraid to put their address on the job application because they think they don't get the job, or they know they don't get the job because of where they're from. So we're asking the government, and especially Minister Roderick O'Gorman, to try to have a law put in place so people can't be discriminated against because of their poverty or their social economic status. So that's a big campaign. We've got about 600, 700 people who supported that campaign online, yourself included, holding the jigsaw piece, which is classed as a missing piece of legislation. And that's what this exhibition is all about, actually.
You mentioned Darndale a couple of times. Darndale is in Coolock, that's where Near FM is. So Darndale and Ballymun are in our catchment area, so this interview will be played in those areas this Sunday. I don't know, have we talked about what you're doing here today?
I can speak about one other thing, because the film in the background is really interesting. With a relatively new project. Again, people who are struggling, young parents. We've started working with Trinity College, and hopefully DCU down the road, where parents will go in and talk to social work students about what it means to live in poverty or to have social work intervention. And these parents will stand up and speak to social work students, and we call it poverty aware practice. So we did that a few weeks ago. We got a really nice film which shows what we've been doing with Trinity. And sometimes these social workers, not always, but sometimes they're from more of an affluent background, and they might not really understand what it means to come from a place like, Sheriff Street, Darndale, Ballymun, or they might have a prejudgment about what that means. So our project is really to have a discussion with these social workers and try to work together in understanding what poverty means a bit more.
And I've experienced of this area myself, but I know Alcohol Action Ireland at the moment are working with a lecturer. I think she is talking about training people working in the health system to be able to spot signs of parental alcohol misuse. Like I say, I've experienced that because I had a drink problem years ago, but that's a huge issue, isn't it? Addiction.
It is, yeah. I mean, we don't class ourselves as a service provider, so we don't do that kind of work, but we work alongside many organisations like SAIL or other groups, like I mentioned before, Matt Talbot Centre, or other groups who are specialists on recovery. But there's a definite link between recovery and poverty. There's a link there, and we know that one of our main things we speak about research, when we know that poverty is very bad for health. But we also know that people in poverty have a lot of a lot of ideas and solutions to these problems as well. So I mean, there's also quite a lot of middle class people who have alcohol addiction or stuff like that.
Like me, I had.
No, but the same. I mean, in families that I know, so it's not only people who are struggling, but it is a big issue.
Like poverty really is like it causes so many problems, doesn't it? I think. Do you agree?
Yeah. I think it causes a lot of problems for the person or the families who are living in poverty. And it's kind of a multi-dimensional thing. We've done a lot of research over the years about how we say poverty is not just about financial problems. It can also be about people who are excluded from society. We've got a piece of research where it defines it as poverty is also about material and social deprivation. It's about social and institutional maltreatment. So people are kind of bullied by the state sometimes. People can be bullied in school, It's also about the people in poverty they have a lack of choice sometimes, lack of income, lack of opportunities. Their own skills and talents are often not recognised by society. And obviously there's a lot of suffering and pain by living in poverty. So poverty, that's just a little bit of an overview, but poverty has a lot of facets, a lot of dimensions,
And I know it's an issue not everywhere, but crime is a huge issue, isn't it? Do you agree? Like I remember talking to a friend of mine years ago, and I won't say where he's from. He's from somewhere in Dublin anyway, a disadvantaged area, and we're talking about the difference between where we live. And he said to me, "At least you feel safe where you live." That's the huge issue, isn't it?
I think, I mean, I'm not a specialist on crime, but I think there's a lot of crime in some of these areas. But I think there's also
drug dealing.
Yeah, drug dealing.
And that's got worse. Crack has only hit Ireland in the last couple of years, really, like big time. And it's in particularly in. I remember RTE did a feature on RTE Primetime just over a year ago, and it was only in 2 areas, but now it's spread. So if it follows the example of the US, I don't know about the UK, but if it follows the US, we're going to have a lot more problems with it,
I mean, that's for sure. I mean, we know in some of these areas, crime's a big deal, drugs a big deal, but I think also we shouldn't say everybody just because they're from a certain area are struggling with drugs, but we know it's an issue, and we're lucky in Dublin. There's a lot of good organisations who support people, But yeah, it's a big deal.
And it's an issue. We're talking there about social. Oh, you mentioned social workers, and I mentioned like people in the healthcare system coming, say, from different backgrounds, middle class or country, rural backgrounds, and the Gardaí as well. Generally, from what I know, don't come from, like in Dublin, disadvantaged backgrounds. That's the case, isn't it?
Again, I don't know, but what I believe is same with social workers, same with health visitors, same with Gardaí. Maybe there's a little bit of work to be done about that poverty-aware practice, understanding a little bit better what people are living, And as an organisation, we're willing to have these conversations, But we're realising, especially through the Trinity Access Programme, there are people who are getting into social work who are from disadvantaged backgrounds, but I think it's not the majority, And sometimes, like we said, it could be it's even worse at the political level. I mean, in the UK especially, but I think in Ireland, a lot of people who are at the government level, the TD, the ministers, not many of them have lived in these areas or know really genuinely the day-to-day of people who are struggling, So there's a gap there.
I went to college in Closterdulig in Coolock, the College of Further Education. There are a good few colleges of further education in Dublin, and I think a lot of them are great. They're doing a great job in areas like social care and stuff. Do you agree?
I do, yeah.
So it's great that the avenues are there, like for nursing as well. Like even if you don't get the points for say social work or nursing, you can do a year or 2 in one of these colleges of further education, and you can pretty much get access then to university. But I know the fees in university now are unbelievable. Even normal colleges, you're coming across that a lot, yeah?
Well, when we recently did this piece of work with Trinity, a lot of the people we were working were saying they never imagined really being able to get into Trinity. It wasn't even on their radar. But like you say, I think there's a lot of good work being done, trying to reach these communities. again, I'm not a specialist on that, but I think that work needs to be highlighted more and pushed more, because I don't think anybody really wants a society where the people who are leading are very disconnected from some of the people, who are struggling. There needs to be them conversations and them bridges built always,
Yeah, DCU, I believe, have some good programme in Finglas, and I think it's Kilbarrack. So that's I only heard about that recently. I won't keep you much longer, Dan, or we could be talking all day.
If you're interested, just because it's in our hand here, I could tell you a few of the groups who was involved yesterday at the Poverty Stone, and it's a way just to recognise what they're doing and the work they're done. So the MC yesterday was a guy called Nesson Vaughan, who did a great job. The Lord Mayor. I
know he's very involved with Near FM.
Oh, right, great. Well, Neston did a wonderful job. I'd like to thank him for coming as well. The Lord Mayor, Caroline Conroy, came, and she did a wonderful speech also about recognising discrimination. We had some wonderful singers from St Mary's Secondary School up in Glasnevin. And we had speakers from different organisations, so it's not just an ATD event. Like I say, we had somebody from the Migrants' Rights Centre, somebody from the Dominican Justice Office. One of our guys, Koi, a young lad, spoke about growing up in care and how that can be linked to discrimination. We had somebody from the Matt Talbot Centre up in Ballyfermot speaking.
I've never heard of them, actually, I don't think.
Near Ballyfermot, yeah, they've been going a while, yeah. They do some really good work with men, mainly, and they're the ones who are working on this sustainable garden. And then we had Mary from Pavy Point, who spoke about what travellers are going through regarding discrimination as well. And we had a great speech from Sale, who are one of our good friends from around the corner there, who do a lot of work with women,
We're talking there a few minutes ago about kind of social workers, people working in the health system and Gardaí not coming from the same backgrounds as a lot of people in communities around the country. And you mentioned as well about politics, it's even worse in some ways. Do you have much interest in politics and political representation in ATD?
Well, one of our... like I say, we try. We're only a small team based in Mountjoy Square in a basement. We're only 4 or 5 people in the team, but we have a lot of links, and we try to work with the families, like I say, in the communities. But we try to reach government as well. So, we with this campaign, for example, we arranged a meeting with Minister Roderick O'Gorman, and one of our lads, Andrew, from the inner city. He spoke out about what it means to be discriminated against. So we're linking all the time, what people are living, and then try to create spaces where politicians, teachers, people in power can have a conversation. So it's normal, like I'm speaking now, but it's normally not my job to do all the speaking. We give the confidence and the space for other people to speak out, who have lived it.
And Roderick O'Gorman, he's the minister responsible, is he, for this?
For this equality legislation, yeah. He's got a few things.
He's one of my local TDs, I know. Just move on to talk a bit more about politics. There are some political parties in Ireland, generally on the left wing, who believe and advocate for quote unquote class politics. Would you agree with that, or are you kind of non-political in that sense, or what?
Well, as a recognised charitable organisation, we're not politically party related, at all to any party. We need to always be neutral, but we do recognise that there is talk about class. It's not a term I like, but I think some people would say they're treated like a second-class citizen or an underclass, or they're looked down upon by people who are more wealthy. So there's issues there to be looked at, but politically we don't get involved in that kind of stuff.
But you're happy to work with any politicians who agree with you and are happy to work with you, yeah?
Yeah, we work with all parties, yeah. Anybody we can create a conversation with, we will, yeah.
Okay, Dan, it's great talking to you here in the Epic Centre. Is there anything else you want to tell our listeners on Near FM about before you go? I believe this is your last day in this centre for this year, isn't it?
It's the last day today. The main day was yesterday, but we're still here all day. But the campaign is out there online. If you look up hashtag #AddThe10th, and there's a way to get involved in that. And the more voices we can have behind this, the better. And I think everyone in society realises that there should be a law that protects people from discrimination of all sorts, And it's not to say the other grounds are not important, because they all are, but this 10th ground is missing, and that needs to be looked at. And you can see the intersectionality of all these grounds together. If we don't have the 10th, which is socio-economic discrimination, it's a shame. And I think Ireland could be a world leader in getting that off the ground.
Great, Dan, it's great talking to you. Thanks very much for talking again at some stage.
Lovely, thank you. Thanks for coming down. Nice one.